Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started. First of all, welcome everybody this afternoon, this evening. We are so glad that you could be with us at today's session, which is called Conspiracy Theories in the Digital Age, and it's going to be presented by Abbie Richards. And whether you're new to Nest or whether you've worked with us before or been to another one of our sessions, we are so glad to have you here with us today. My name is Allison Blair. I am the program coordinator for Nest, and my pronouns are she, her. I just would love to give you a little bit of a background of Nest before we get started. So Nest was established in 2004, and since then we have provided comprehensive violence prevention education in various school settings across the United States. We have an innovative new K-12 programming, violence prevention curricula. It's called You Belong Here. And that programming is transforming the status quo in harm and violence prevention, both by fostering the health and well-being of individuals, as well as engendering positive cultural and societal outcomes. Our interventions are meant to not only provide means to prevent harmful behavior, but to also nurture young people's competencies, to uplift their strengths, and to give them or instill a sense of purpose so that they can flourish in their schools and in their careers and throughout their lives. We're trying to build a more equitable and sustainable world through human-centered education that supports institutional change. So welcome to Nest. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. Live transcription and captioning has been turned on for this session. You can access that in the menu bar below. And if you have any questions about that, please reach out to me in the chat and I'll help you troubleshoot. We will have a brief Q&A session after the presentation, so please feel free to drop your questions into the Q&A box and we'll do our best to answer them in the time allotted. If your question does not get answered tonight, please don't worry. We're going to be sending out a follow-up email with some additional resources in the coming days. So be on the lookout for that. So let's jump in. We are so privileged to have Abbie Richards with us today. Abbie specializes in understanding how misinformation, conspiracy theories, and extremism spread on TikTok. And she creates educational content which explains these complex issues to a broader audience. She has amassed a multi-platform following of over 500,000 people interested in learning about these issues. Abbie's master's thesis was on the intersection of climate change and disinformation. She is also a co-founder of EcoTalk, an environmental TikTok collective specializing in social media-based climate communication. So please join me and Nest in welcoming Abbie Richards. Welcome, Abbie.
Hello, thank you. Do I just take it from here? I take it?
You take it from here, absolutely.
Let's go. I'm going to share my screen. Hello, everybody. Let's get right into it. So, we already just covered a lot of it, but we're going to be talking about conspiracy theories in the digital age. And that was a lovely and very comprehensive intro. I think that you've covered everything that there really is about me. The only thing that was left out is my username, which is Tofology, which is meaningless. I made it up. It's the study of tofu. I'm just a big fan of tofu. But I research misinformation and extremism online, specifically when it comes to short form video content, so things like TikTok. And then I also make educational content to try and counter that. And today we're going to be really unpacking conspiracy theories. I wanted to do a deep dive and like a dissection of what the conspiracy theory is, because I think it's a term that's just thrown around a lot, especially now. And people haven't really sat and thought through exactly what they're using and why they're describing certain things as a conspiracy theory. And so this is going to be our opportunity to like really deep dive into them. So what is a conspiracy theory? There's a couple of different definitions that you'll see float around, and these are two that I like. So one is a theory that explains an event or set of circumstances as the result of a secret plot, usually by powerful actors. And the next one is very similar. The only difference, you'll spot it, is so this definition is an explanatory beliefs about a group of actors that collude in secret to reach malevolent goals. And the big difference there is that malevolent word that's doing a lot of the lifting in that sentence. So that's the projection of some sort of evil intent onto the theory. And like both of these are valid descriptions, they're just different definitions. So what's the difference between a conspiracy and a conspiracy theory? So conspiracy is like a very real crime that people commit and are charged with regularly. It's really just when more than one person, so two or more people, get together and decide to do something that is, like they plot to do something that is either illegal or malicious in some sort of way. So if you and me get together and decide that we're going to go rob a bank, that is conspiracy to go do bank robbery. We would be doing a conspiracy in that instance. And then like instances of conspiracy are abundant in history. I mean, one great instance is Watergate, where we have that collusion to do something that is malicious. And another instance is tobacco companies misleading the public, right? They knew that tobacco caused cancer, and yet they engaged in decades of misleading and deceptive messaging to convince the public otherwise. Now, a conspiracy theory tends to be much bigger. It's lacking the evidence that a conspiracy has. Conspiracies tend to have much fewer people involved. There's just not that many people who can keep a secret. So real conspiracies, when we actually see them, have a limited number of people that we can point to of who was actually involved in that conspiracy, whereas a conspiracy theory is broad and it has some vast undetermined number of people who would be involved in it. So the moon landing was fake is a great one because, you know, how many thousands of people would have to be in on that for that to be true? We could never pinpoint it down. And then a lot of the time with the conspiracy theory, it's there is no evidence for it, and it's simultaneously, it's not falsifiable necessarily. I mean, a lot of them are thrive in this area of like, well, you can't disprove every single claim. Now, a conspiracy ideology, sometimes it's called conspiracy mindset or a conspiracy worldview. That is a way of interpreting the world where you start seeing everything through the lens of conspiracy. So you've probably met people who do this. It's more of a framework of interpreting the world. It becomes much bigger than just a singular conspiracy theory. And conspiracy theories are not new. As much as some people feel like they are, conspiracy theories are fundamentally like such a human phenomenon. So Hitler blamed Germany's loss of World War I on the Jewish conspiracy. In medieval times, Jews were blamed for plagues. But like as far back as the Roman era, there's a conspiracy theory about Nero singing as Rome burns, but he wasn't even in town when the fire started. And it's this great instance where a conspiracy theory was used to explain this, some sort of agency behind this fire and trying to find someone to blame. So really it's important to understand like conspiracy theories they're so human, and it's very likely that they've been around as long as there has been society and language and communities, and it's also very likely that they will continue to be around. I don't think that they're likely to go away. And that's because our brains are sense-making machines. We are constantly looking for patterns and connections to make sense of the world. Sense-making processes are cognitive attempts to establish straightforward, meaningful, and causal relationships between stimuli. So like if I hit my face, like I know that that'll hurt because I've done it before. I can piece together these external stimuli and figure out what sort of causal relationship and meanings they would have. So without our brains being able to do this, there would be no the reality wouldn't be predictable. We would be constantly experiencing everything as like new information. We wouldn't be able to like understand anything to do with the world. And a conspiracy theory emerges when we take this like pattern recognition that we use to make sense of the world, and understanding causal relationships between physical stimuli, events, and actors, and then also combine it with agency. And so agency those are assumptions about intentionality or purpose, and we are projecting some sort of meaning onto events that we are seeing. So a example of this is, let's say there's a plane crash because of some sort of technological error. That is, you can say there's a causal relationship between the error and the plane crash, but if we apply agency where somebody sabotaged it, now we're working with a conspiracy theory. And yeah, by combining these things, conspiracy theories offer people a framework to make sense of the world, particularly when they are experiencing a lot of stress. Stressful events set your brain on fire. They activate all of your sense-making processes and like put them on steroids. And that's like actually very important. You probably wouldn't have survived that many animals, or your ancestors wouldn't have survived that many animals hunting them if your brain couldn't do this. When you are under threat, it's helpful that you're able to be paying extra attention to patterns that you might be seeing, right? And just thinking about all of those patterns much more than you are when you're calm and you're much more complacent. So a sense of existential threat increases the extent to which people perceive patterns in random stimuli. It's actually very interesting. There's been some great science done around this. So if you feel like your sense of control is threatened, you're much more likely to see images in like noisy pictures, or like in like a meaningless image, for instance, like clouds. Like you're much more likely to see images that don't exist there. Or similarly, you're much more likely to see patterns that aren't there in random stock market information. So when you feel threatened, you are far more likely to piece together all these pieces of information into a puzzle that isn't necessarily real, but that's what your brain does. And also, when you feel threatened, you are more likely to be detecting agency. So assuming that there is meaning behind the events that you're experiencing. And that's why conspiracy theories and crisis are they're such pals. Whenever there's a crisis, we often will see conspiracy theories emerge. I think that's something that feels very true to most people who've lived through the COVID pandemic. And a good way to think about this is that when we are experiencing a crisis that feels so big, our brains tend to want an equally big explanation for it. We don't like to settle on stories about just the universe is chaotic and things happen that we can never understand that are completely they're instances of coincidence, or just the wrong combination of factors occurred and set off a pandemic or set off a fire or began a war. There's so many big societal crises, and we tend to want a big explanation, one that feels equally as big as the crisis itself. That's just what our brains want. So a good example of this is Princess Diana dying in a car crash versus being murdered. It's a public figure who was so important to so many people. This accident, this fluke in an otherwise perfect world, it doesn't make sense to our brains, so we tend to want this bigger explanation. Also, conspiracy theories give order to chaos. So when we're experiencing a crisis, they provide us with certainty in times of uncertainty. They give meaning to our suffering. They provide us with a narrative that we can latch onto, and that narrative will give us a greater sense of control, feeling like we understand what's going on, particularly when what's going on is like fundamentally not understandable at all, is so empowering for us. Even that, like, we'll choose a story that is fiction over uncertainty. Every single time we'll choose that because that is far more comfortable for us. And conspiracy theories are a response to anxiety, right? If you're feeling like you don't have control, if you're feeling uncertain, you will turn to these narratives that provide really simple explanations for these phenomenon that you're experiencing, but simultaneously they can actually cause more anxiety because the stories they tell oftentimes depict a worldview that like justifiably like would make you anxious. So if you believe that, like, if you buy into a narrative where there's this group of evil lizard people secretly controlling the world, in some ways that gives you a sense of understanding and a sense of meaning to your suffering, but simultaneously it makes you very anxious because now you have to believe that there's a group of lizard people controlling the world and like you don't really have much agency. It's going to increase your anxiety and kind of perpetually feed back. This is one, I love a visualization. We're going to spend a little bit on visualizations now. And this is one visualization that I really like. It's called the existential threat model of conspiracy theories. And here we have, like, there's an existential threat, whatever it is, and then that is interpreted through our sense-making processes, the way our brains just try and cognitively process the world. And if there is an antagonistic outgroup present, so a group that we can essentially scapegoat, then we can create we can put the blame on them and create a conspiracy theory, which then makes us anxious and increases our sense of existential threat, which is then processed through our sense-making systems. And then we continue to blame that group. That group can be a high power group. So think politicians or CEOs or bankers, but it can also be a low power group. So that's oftentimes marginalized groups. So, you know, I think that a very topical one, that a lot of people are dealing with the fallouts of right now is all of the groomer conspiracy theories. So in that sense, people are placing the blame on the antagonistic outgroup that is the LGBTQ community. So this is my conspiracy chart. I made it. I'm very proud of it. It is my baby. I first made it in 2020, but this is the 2021 version. If you go to conspiracychart.com, you'll find an interactive version with like links that you can click that will give you more information on each one. But we're going to spend a little while just unpacking it. So it starts actually at the bottom and it moves up. So it starts in grounded in reality and moves up towards detached from reality. And it has these 5 sections. And we'll start at the bottom, we'll work our way up. So at the bottom are things that actually happened. These are real instances of actual conspiracies. And it's important that when we have conversations about conspiracy theories, that we are also acknowledging that, like, people in power abuse their power. People in power need to be held accountable for when they abuse their power. A lot of the times, if you start disputing conspiracy theories, you'll be accused of being some sort of shill for people in power. People do it to me. I'm very much not. But so I think that, yeah, as part of this conversation, we have to acknowledge and consistently acknowledge what actual power abuse looks like, because otherwise it's really easy to just fall into these simple stories that paint people in power as having almost supernatural capabilities, when in reality, power abuse is much quieter and it's much more systemic and it's baked into everything about our society. And in that way, it's actually so much more devastating because it's not happening behind closed doors. So yeah, the bottom here, these are real conspiracies that have actually happened. So we talked about Watergate or the Tuskegee experiment. We also have things like the FBI spied on MLK. That really happened. Big Oil has pushed so much climate disinfo. There was MK Ultra. I added Free Britney on here. So real instances where people in power were abusing their power and lying about it in some way. As we move up, we cross the speculation line. So this is the we have questions category. And I also definitely encourage people to ask questions. And I think that when we're having these conversations too with children and with young people, in no way do we want to be positioning ourselves as any sort of like source of definitive truth, because the reality is that these things are always changing. What's considered, evidence-based and backed by science can change. That's the beauty of science, is that we are always learning more things. So before I go any further, I also want to say, like, this is a framework, and it's a framework for thinking about conspiracy theories and for understanding them. Where I place things might not actually be the exact same as where you place them. And I think that giving people agency to decide to some extent, what feels right for them, what feels like just, asking a question versus like what feels completely, unreasonable, not real. That's for them to decide, and giving them that power is important. So this is just a framework. So yeah, this is the we have questions category. These are things that we have questions about. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, what's happening in Area 51, right? What's going on with UFOs? We know that we keep seeing them. We don't know that they're aliens, but we certainly know that there are weird images floating around the internet. Like, what are they? Do we live in a simulation? Like, why is the Denver International Airport so weird? These are things for me that I have questions about. As we move up, we leave reality and we enter the unequivocally false, but mostly harmless section. This is in the pink. And these are what people typically describe as like fun conspiracies, harmless conspiracies, the ones that are really about oftentimes celebrities or specific people, but I would, say like alien abductions, or was Avril Lavigne replaced by a woman named Melissa? Is Tupac alive in Serbia? These are those sorts of conspiracy theories. There's the mattress firm is a money laundering scheme. It's not, it's just like really cheap to own and operate mattress stores, but that's one that I still see a lot. And although I call this section like mostly harmless, I do think it's worth acknowledging that like treating anybody's life, even if they are a celebrity like this, in a way where we'll talk about them as though they were replaced by some sort of clone, or like, their story is not real, or they're part of some scheme, is fundamentally like dehumanizing. So I do think that engaging with these, it should just be taken seriously to some extent. Like it's not necessarily harmless to go about viewing other humans as vampires. And I don't know, I don't think that really helps us in fighting any sort of power abuse either. So moving up, then we cross reality denial. And these are conspiracy theories that deny the consensus on science or politics or history, and deny the common reality that we have created. So something like global warming is a hoax, or the pandemic was planned, vaccines have microchips, Biden is a robot, the election was stolen, flat earth sorts of conspiracies, I put them here. These are dangerous, because it's important that we are all on the same page when it comes to navigating things like science and medicine. We want people to be informed when they're making medical choices about themselves and things that affect entire societies. And we also want them to be informed and on the same kind of basis of reality as the rest of us when it comes to things like voting. So these ones are dangerous misinformation. And then finally, we pass the anti-Semitic point of no return. These are conspiracy theories that paint the world as being like owned or ruled by some sort of shadow elite that has near supernatural powers of control, and always malicious motives. And fundamentally, these narratives promote hatred and violence towards marginalized groups. So these are the narratives that are really focused on like that antagonistic outgroup, either putting it, on Jewish people or putting it on immigrants. Like finding a group to blame is a core part of those conspiracy theories. And I think these are some of the scarier ones too, and the ones that I think we've seen have a lot of political influence too, more so than say like Avril Lavigne getting replaced by a woman named Melissa. So what are common themes, differences in conspiracy theories? I think it'll be good to unpack this a bit, because there are certain things that a lot of conspiracy theories have in common with each other, and then there are differences. So a lot of conspiracy theories have elements of control and lies, power, elites who have somehow a wild amount of power. They also have dualism. You'll see a lot of dualism, and that's really these narratives of like good and evil, just two groups. Just you're either good or you're evil. You're either with us or against us. You'll also see a lot of grains of truth. Every good lie has grains of truth, and you'll see that incorporated into a lot of conspiracy theories too. It makes it much easier to buy into. And you'll also see connectivity with other conspiracy theories. So using one conspiracy theory as evidence for another, and simultaneously you'll see contradictory beliefs, which are super interesting. This is a wild phenomenon that is so fascinating to me. If you have a conspiracy belief, you are more likely to have contradictory beliefs, to hold contradictory beliefs at the same time. So the best way to describe this is an interesting study that found that like people who believed that Princess Diana was murdered were also more likely to believe that she was still alive. So they're holding one conspiracy theory, but they're simultaneously able to make room for a completely contradictory belief that is also a conspiracy theory. They can actually just hold both in their hands at the same time, which I think is a little horrifying and a little wonderful and fascinating. You'll see a lot of differences when it comes to things like severity and plausibility. Which groups are we talking about, right? Like who are the in groups, who are the out groups? How do those groups identify? And that could vary, within just certain communities. It can also vary a lot geographically. So which country you're in or which region of a country you're in will change who you view as your in-group versus your out-group. So that'll change which group you might place blame onto. Which group that you will like use as a scapegoat will depend upon where you are. And then they'll also range in extremeness. So it's just how fringe they are. Why are so many conspiracy theories anti-Semitic? I get this question a lot. I've answered it a few times on TikTok, and yet it's just one of those things that I'll have to answer my whole life. As we've already discussed, right? Conspiracy theories are fundamentally a human phenomenon. They're not inherently anti-Semitic because, they've been around for so long. But the best way to understand this is that the framework, the blueprint upon which the modern conspiracy theory is built is anti-Semitic. So the modern conspiracy theory is really built on the blueprint of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is a piece of Russian disinformation published in 1903 that purported to be the meeting notes from a group of Jews trying to take over the world. Totally fabricated, actually partially plagiarized from a French work of fiction, but nonetheless picked up. It was it disseminated in Russia. It was eventually used by the Nazis, incorporated even into some educational like some of their curricula, and also distributed by Henry Ford in the US, who distributed like several 100,000 copies in the US. And this was really a good way to think about it, is that at this time, 1903, we're starting to have a more global view of the world. This is, this idea of a group controlling the entire world is a bit new at this time. It's been floating around, but this is really where I think it gets a lot of its roots. This just work of fiction became the framework upon which the modern conspiracy is built. And that's why so many conspiracy theories end up with anti-Semitism. Or there's an additional explanation of that goes into the history of Europe, but this is the primary thing that I want you to take away, is that Jews existed in Europe and were historically othered a lot because they were a effective antagonistic outgroup that people could project their problems onto. And then we got this one work of fiction that became the basis upon which our modern conspiracy theories are built. So something like QAnon is very much rooted in the protocols of the Elders of Zion. Now, this is the digital part of this talk. Because this is a big question, is does the internet make conspiracy theories worse? And the answer is that nobody knows. And anyone who does say they know, it has too much confidence, because this can't be measured. There's no way to really objectively say over the course of history exactly how many people have believed conspiracy theories at which times. And it's hard to know, because we know conspiracy theories are extremely like they're a human problem. They're not because of the internet. But simultaneously, we all have the experience, I think, of feeling like the internet has made them very loud. And that's because what the internet does magnificently well is flood all of our feeds with content that these algorithms know we will enjoy. The goal of these algorithms, the goal of social media, is to keep us on that platform as long as possible so that we can continue consuming advertisements and creating profit for those platforms for as much time as possible, because that's what makes us profitable, is our eyeballs on the content and staying on the platforms. So algorithms are really not designed in any way, shape, or form to push content to users that makes them better informed or makes them like healthier and well-adjusted. They are designed to keep them on the platform, and they will do that by showing them content that appeals to their emotions, or makes them angry, or makes them sad, makes them extremely reactive in some way. And conspiracy theories are the pinnacle of that sort of content, right? Conspiracy theories are delicious. They're yummy. They're clickbait. Like, they make us angry. They make us feel very afraid. They are often fascinating. Just if we take them as stories, they often appear like fantasy or sci-fi. So they are just interesting sometimes in and of themselves, and incorporate interesting elements. They make people feel like they're learning, and they will make people feel as though they are understanding a complex problem in a way that speaks to them. So yeah, these are like super yummy to us. We love these, and that makes them pair magnificently with algorithms that want to keep us hooked on the platforms. And because we use digital information along with all the other information that we collect throughout our days and lives to create our reality, if we are in ecosystems that are showing us a disproportionate amount of information that is false and is like conspiratorial, that seemingly would help to facilitate a conspiracy worldview, because that's the information that you have access to. That's what you're going to use to build your understanding of the world. And if all the information you're encountering is promoting conspiracies, then it makes sense that you're going to create some sort of conspiracy worldview. So to wrap things up and tie things in a knot and a little bow, why do we believe conspiracy theories? Fundamentally, simple answers to complex questions. That's like the biggest takeaway. Imagining that the world can be divided into good versus evil, and trying to understand all of the frustrations and beyond frustrations, just like the devastations that we encounter living our lives. It's oftentimes very appealing to turn to simple answers and to find scapegoats. And conspiracy theories meet three needs. They meet epistemic, existential, and social needs. So epistemic are, those needs that appeal to our sense of understanding. So these are conspiracies that, they provide answers in the face of uncertainty, in order to chaos. They make us feel like we do understand what's going on. And then existential needs are needs to feel safe, to feel secure, to feel in control. We all desire that. There's all of these needs are things that we do need. We all need to feel safe and secure, and conspiracy theories will appeal to those needs. And finally, for social needs, so these are needs to feel part of a group and to feel, maybe privy to special knowledge that other people don't have. We want to feel special. We want to feel smarter than others. And we want to feel like we have a group that we can identify with. So how are conspiracy theories harmful? It's worth noting that there's some research into the benefits of conspiracy theories. There's more evidence of their harm than there really is their benefits. One of the interesting things with conspiracy theories is that they purport and seemingly are a way to challenge authority and challenge power, but in reality, they tend to justify the status quo. They tend to do they're a mechanism for blaming major systemic failures on a couple bad apples, right? It's not our global systems and the way that we've set the world up. It's that the lizard people are in control, and you can't vote a lizard person out of office. So there's just not that much you can do. It ends up justifying the status quo and just saying, you need different lizard people in control. So yeah, for their benefits, some people will say that they challenge power. I fall down much more on the side of they actually tend to fortify the existing power structures and justify the larger systems that we have in place. Conspiracy theories are also associated with decreased pro-social behavior and increased individualism. So those are actions that help the community. So things like masking, things like getting vaccinated, environmental choices. Conspiracy theories are associated with decreased likelihood of participating in those community-oriented behaviors and increase in individualist behaviors that might help you short-term or align with make you feel better short-term, but don't necessarily help the community. There's also associated with decreased trust in science and medicine. They can be manipulated for political gain, as we've certainly seen throughout history. There's a positive association with intention to engage in violence, which is a lot of words in a specific order that is important, because not all people who believe in conspiracy theories are violent. Actually, the vast majority of people have a conspiracy theory that they believe in. So it is not accurate to say that that people who believe in conspiracy theories are violent. Overwhelmingly, they're not. But there is still a relationship, particularly with especially extreme or hateful conspiracies. There's also this promotion of negative attitudes towards outgroups that we talked about. So anti-Semitism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, right? This projection of problems onto an outgroup. It's a radicalization multiplier. So there again is this relationship between conspiracy theories and violent extremism, particularly in how they paint this worldview of good versus evil, and an us versus them, where there is a dire, like a need for dire action, right? If you genuinely believe that the world is being controlled by a group of pedophilic elite who are sacrificing children and drinking their blood, right? Like this is like QAnon mythology. If you genuinely believe that, it makes sense that you would feel as though you have nothing to lose. So there's that relationship between conspiracy theories that paint others as, monsters, and simultaneously make you feel like you have justification for violence. And then finally, they damage personal relationships. This is something that we've seen, I think really throughout like the pandemic, and still we're just constantly hearing stories about people who've lost really important relationships, like divorces, or like children who can't talk to their parents, siblings who've fallen out because one of them is so deep in conspiracy theories that the other person just can't really connect with them anymore. And that's very sad. And yeah, that wraps up my presentation and brings me to the Q&A. But thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Abbie. We've already got some really great questions in the Q&A box, and I obviously have a lot of questions myself, so I'm excited to dive in. But thank you so much for that presentation. Let's start with and folks, if you have questions, please drop them in the Q&A box and we'll try to get to them as they come in. So our first question is, can you speak to incel ideology as a conspiracy theory?
See, the researcher in me is going to be like, no, they're different. There's certainly overlap, but I think it's important to differentiate just between like another hateful ideology, another way of viewing the world, and a conspiracy theory. Because in the incel ideology, they aren't saying that there's like a group of elite women who are making decisions to like withhold it. It's all women. It's not some sort of power. It's much more structural in their minds. So I think at least, I don't specifically research incels, but I would not necessarily classify it. It's definitely possible that there's some overlap, but I wouldn't say that that's a conspiracy theory.
Mm-hmm. And differentiating that sort of violent or extreme belief from what a conspiracy theory is.
Yeah, definitely. Like, you don't have to hold conspiracy beliefs necessarily to be violent. You can just have an ideology outside of, conspiracies that ideology in and of itself is violent.
Mm-hmm. So the next question is about, this person says, it feels like the opposition to sex education, trans healthcare, and library collections are suddenly being motivated by extreme conspiracy theories. What do you think about this?
Yeah. Your intuition is right. They certainly are. I would say that they're not, it might be better to frame it as like the conspiracy theories are a tool to do those things, rather than the conspiracy theories themselves are what are the instigator. Because I think that there are much deeper systems of religion and gender norms and white supremacy that run much deeper than those conspiracy theories. But conspiracy theories are very useful for tapping into those existing systems and giving people a reason to take action, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That conspiracy theories can be used to sort of prop up these hateful ideologies.
Yeah. People already have these ideologies. They're baked into our system, and people in power have them, and people know how to weaponize them for political gains.
Mm. I have a question. Are there, in your experience and in your research, are there certain people that are more predisposed to be susceptible to conspiracy theories?
Oh, it's such an interesting question. Wait, before I answer that, should I stop sharing my screen?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So, I mean, again, fundamentally human. It's just humans are predisposed to it. We do know that there are certain circumstances that will make you more emotionally prone to it, right? So if you're going through big life changes, right, or you just feel uncertain, or you don't have a strong sense of identity at that moment, then they can be very appealing. I think powerlessness is one of the big themes that we repeatedly see, is if somebody feels powerless, conspiracy theories often, or they offer a sense of meaning and a sense of empowerment, or false, I would say false empowerment, to those people. We also know that 14 is actually the prime age for believing conspiracy theories. That's not to say adults don't. We know adults do. We've all seen it. But I think it actually makes a lot of sense that at 14, like, you're starting to you're trying to understand the world. You're looking at like this super complex world that we're all navigating. And it makes sense that you would actually end up gravitating towards these very simple stories to understand the world. I know that when I was 14, I totally bought into them.
Yeah. And, converging with that is a lot of 14-year-olds are on the internet and on social media. So I would love to sort of segue from that into the question of how can we all sort of cultivate better critical thinking skills when it comes to the information that we get from social media, but also specifically, how can parents or educators or adults with kids in their lives help them use social media in a more informed way, since they are so susceptible as young people?
Yeah. So we can all engage in social media in a way that is like just a little bit more distanced. It's important that when you're navigating social media, like, just to remind yourself to stay skeptical, to not buy into something the first time you hear it, or even the second time, and that you always have the power to go, give it a Google, see what more authoritative sources are saying. You always have the power to do a reverse image search, right? Like, there's a lot of computer generated images floating around right now. I think we're going to continue seeing that. So a really great skill, like, thing that you can always do is just pop that in a reverse image search and see if it's a real image. So, and also just pay attention to your emotions, right? If something is making you feel extremely angry or extremely upset, or just like triggering your raw emotions, it's good to take a step back in those moments, because we know that misinformation does best when it triggers certain emotions, when it triggers outrage, when it triggers fear, or sometimes even like humiliation. And so those are things that we can do as adults. It's also so important to also acknowledge that, like, the burden should not be on us to navigate what is true and false on these platforms. These platforms have a responsibility to us. And I want to make sure that whenever we're talking about like literacy, while it is important, it's more important that the platforms themselves are safe and the platforms aren't putting us in a position where we are constantly exposed to false information, because that there's just like nothing we can, like, there's only so much literacy that we can apply to try and weed out bad information. And even that is like, that literacy approach that we might use is only going to be used by the most privileged people who have access to that sort of education. So when it comes to helping children, understand social media. I think one of the best things that we can do is to get ahead of, like, before they even start using, to help them understand what they might encounter on there and have like active conversations and constant conversations about what sorts of narratives they might see, and what they should be skeptical of, and how they can, like, just be paying attention for especially hateful rhetoric and hateful narratives. So helping them to understand what those are before they fall into them. I think that's helpful. And then again, if the kid's already on social media, it's not too late to be doing that and to be like having those conversations. I wouldn't advocate for like, a strict control of everything they do online. I don't personally believe that's very helpful. And I think that doesn't set up an environment where that we want with like trust and active communication. I think that, if we're building a resilient youth when it comes to like digital usage, we want them to feel like they can speak to the adults in their lives about what they see online.
Yeah, and have those honest conversations and gain those critical thinking skills, right? Rather than just being banned from being able to use social media. Yeah, that's such great, insightful pieces of information. I know that we had someone submit a question when they registered for the webinar about how we can advocate effectively locally against groups who are sharing misinformation. So are there sort of ways, on the ground that we can be combating the spread of misinformation?
Yeah, I actually advocate for a lot more community-oriented approaches. I mean, first of all, log off and go do things in your community and see if you can get other people who are spreading this information to also log off and do something in their community. Like, go plant a flower garden, please. Go touch grass. Is the biggest thing. Like, truly the best thing that we can do is get people logging off. Like, that is like, they need distance from these ideologies, they need distance from those communities. And then beyond that, I mean, creating community resilience and building relationships so people know you, building trust within your community. I think that's a crucial part of building bridges. And then one thing that I will always advocate for is local journalism, and figuring out, how much local journalism do you have? Is it funded? Is there anybody doing it? Because a lot of it was eaten up by vulture companies, and we've lost a lot of local journalism in this country. I'm biased. My mom was a local journalist. She's the editor of our local paper. And so I will always push for more local journalism, because I watched that paper go from having like 2.5 reporters to just being mushed in with a bunch of other papers under a vulture media company. So yeah, I would say that's a big thing to push for in your community, is where are people getting their information? Is there an accurate information source available?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Abbie. So I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more quick questions. I see some people drop some in the Q&A box. Why do you feel that so many conspiracy theories were highlighted during the COVID lockdown? What were the contributing factors to that, do you think?
We were so uncertain. We were so anxious. We're all terrified. We all are spending way too much time online. But fundamentally, I mean, in times of great anxiety, like, we want to find somebody to blame. We want to feel like we understand what's going on. So we have this time, right? I'm thinking especially like early lockdown days, those first maybe 6 months, or even that whole first year, but we had no sense of how long this was going to be. Was this going to like alter our lives for the next 50 years, forever? Like, were we ever going to get back to like this normal that we remembered attaining at one point? Was this just going to be a couple months? Like, what was going on? And we were all craving, like so desperately craving a way to understand that. And what sucks, and a reason why we can never really win against conspiracy theories is like, we don't have that. Like, science takes time, and also reality is not predictable, and it doesn't unfold in a 3-story act in the way that our brains believe narratives should. So when we are seeking to understand things, we will just jump on a narrative that makes us feel like we do understand it. So yeah, it's that heightened uncertainty. There was so much trauma and like fear. You saw people who just, there's always the approach of just stick your head in the sand, right? Like, this isn't real, it's not happening. We see it with pandemics. We also see it with climate change. If something's really scary, you'll always have some people who just go like, nope, stick their head in. Yep. And beyond that, right, you'll also see conspiracy theories where they want to blame another group, right? They want to blame, in this case, it was usually Chinese people, or the Chinese government, or Jewish people for creating the virus, like whatever it was, like they want to find a group to blame. So there were a lot of emotional factors that like stew up to create this perfect environment for conspiracy theories to thrive.
So we're almost at time, but we have one more question, which I think will segue sort of nicely into wrapping up. This person's asking what sources you've used in research to obtain your data and your information. And I would imagine that's probably available on your website.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So what we're going to do is we're going to send a follow-up, and we'll have all of Abbie's website and contact information. So you'll be able to see her research and all of her sources that she used. But I would love for you to expand on that.
Yeah, so for a lot of my presentation, so the website, you'll find sources on, you'll find the conspiracy chart, which has like links for each of the conspiracies. And then you'll also find all of my written work on all things TikTok and misinformation, and then things that I've been cited in. If you want to specifically deep dive into a lot of what I just talked about in my presentation, which is like the psychology and history of conspiracy theories, Van Pruyen, who did the existential threat model of conspiracy theories, and also Karen Douglas, she's like the queen of understanding all things psychology of conspiracy theory. So I get a lot of my information from her.
Awesome. So we'll go ahead and obviously in that follow-up, we'll send Abbie's website, we'll send some information on Karen Douglas, and we'll send some information on who did you say created the
I'll type it, Van Pruyen. Make sure I got that right.
Okay, great. And we'll send those to everybody so you can check them out. And we are at time. Abbie, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We're so grateful for you and your expertise. And this is such a fascinating conversation, and one that I think that we can all take some information with us as we move about the world moving forward. So thank you so much.
Of course, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This was fun. I mean, it's a little dark, but it's always interesting to deep dive into conspiracy theories and really think about what is this term that's just being thrown around everywhere, and what does it mean? Why do we do it?
Yeah, and how can we, dive a little deeper to try to understand the world and ourselves a little bit better. Yeah. So I just want to thank you again so much for being with us tonight. I want to thank everyone who is here with us. Thanks for coming and spending some time with us tonight. I'm going to send out a follow-up email in the next couple of days with some more resources. I'm going to drop into the chat a quick little survey link that you can take a couple minutes to fill out. Just let us know what else we might be able to provide you with in terms of these free sessions and more information that you might like to might like to receive from us. And I think that'll be it for us tonight, but we are so grateful again to Abbie. We'll send all of her information to you in a follow-up, and we hope to see you all soon, and we hope you have a great evening. Take care.